You assume ancient couples either mated for life like swans or barely stayed together at all. And the real answer is stranger than either. Here's the strange part. Humans are neither strictly loyal like some birds nor freely promiscuous like many primates, and nobody fully agrees why. By the end of this, you'll understand why your own instincts around love and jealousy were shaped long before marriage even existed. You'd assume our closest animal relatives would show us a clear answer, one clean model of loyalty carried straight into ancient human life. Most people assume chimpanzees and bonobos represent the natural human baseline. Actually, humans sit strangely between them and far more loyal species entirely. Gibbons form tight lifelong pairs, gorillas keep entire harems, and chimpanzees mate with nearly everyone. Yet humans somehow landed in the confusing middle. Bonobos take promiscuity even further, using sex constantly to ease tension between friends, rivals, and strangers, with almost no fixed pairing at all. Now consider what this really means. Ancient humans were never purely one thing. Flexible pair bonding, not fixed instinct, defined the species from the start. Somewhere in that evolutionary middle ground, one strange biological clue quietly separated humans from almost every other primate on the planet. Unlike most female primates, human females never visibly advertise fertility, hiding ovulation so completely that even the woman herself often cannot tell. Imagine this. An ancient male has no visible signal telling him when a mate is fertile, so leaving becomes a genuinely risky gamble. That hidden fertility window may have quietly pressured ancient males to simply stick around, just in case today happened to be the day. Some researchers believe hidden ovulation evolved specifically to trade constant uncertainty for something valuable: a partner's steady presence, protection, and shared food. Here's the detail nobody expects. Human infants are born unusually helpless compared to other primates, unable to even hold up their own heads. A helpless human infant needed near-constant care for years, unable to walk, feed itself, or survive without help far longer than any ape infant. Two committed caregivers dramatically raised a human infant's odds of survival, quietly favoring ancient couples who stayed bonded through those brutal early years. Here's what nobody mentions. Even two parents alone often weren't quite enough to keep every ancient child alive through those fragile years. Anthropologists call this the grandmother hypothesis. Older women who had stopped having children of their own instead helped raise their grandchildren. Picture an aging grandmother gathering food and minding toddlers, freeing a young mother to nurse an infant and gather food herself. That extra support may have loosened pressure on any single pair to do absolutely everything alone, spreading child-rearing across an entire family. Now here's where it gets interesting. Scientists eventually traced part of this bonding instinct down to two specific chemicals inside the brain. Oxytocin and vasopressin flood the human brain during touch, sex, and childbirth, chemically reinforcing attachment between partners over repeated shared experiences. Researchers studying prairie voles, one of the few mammals that pair bond for life, found the exact same two chemicals driving their loyalty. Change those chemical receptors in a prairie vole's brain, and a naturally loyal, bonded animal suddenly starts mating with anyone nearby instead. A closely related vole species, lacking those same receptors, never pair bonds at all, mating freely and never forming any lasting attachment whatsoever. That single comparison suggested ancient human loyalty might partly run on the very same ancient chemical wiring shared with a small burrowing rodent. Modern brain scans of people newly in love show activity in reward regions strikingly similar to those lit up by addictive drugs. You feel the same neurological rush your ancient ancestors once felt, wired by evolution to make a new partner feel briefly irresistible. But there's a catch nobody mentions. Human anatomy itself carries a quieter clue about just how loyal ancient relationships probably were. Species with highly promiscuous mating produce unusually large testicles relative to body size, built for direct sperm competition between multiple rival males. Human anatomy sits below chimpanzees and bonobos in that measurement, yet clearly above strictly monogamous gorillas, hinting at moderate, occasional infidelity. That anatomical middle ground matches everything else about ancient human loyalty. Mostly bonded, but never quite as airtight as true lifelong monogamy. Some researchers point to another subtle clue: ancient male behavior patterns resembling mate guarding, staying unusually close during a partner's fertile window. You picture an ancient man lingering near camp during certain days, watchful and attentive, without ever consciously knowing exactly why. Archaeologists studying ancient burial sites frequently found male and female skeletons laid to rest side by side, facing each other, surrounded by matching grave goods. Turns out, the truth is even stranger than any single grave site could suggest. Once researchers looked at ancient DNA across entire populations. Geneticists studying ancient Y-chromosomes passed down through countless generations found something buried inside humanity's own reproductive history that nobody expected. Now here's the twist most people never hear. Around 7,000 years ago, roughly one man reproduced for every 17 women who did. That staggering imbalance suggests a small number of powerful men fathered enormous numbers of children, while most ordinary men left no descendants at all. Here's why that number should stop you cold. This wasn't ancient romance. It looked more like a handful of dominant bloodlines outcompeting everyone else. Researchers believe roaming groups of related men may have violently conquered rivals, seizing multiple wives and locking ordinary men out of reproduction entirely. You picture an ordinary ancient man, loyal and hardworking, quietly locked out of fatherhood by a handful of powerful rivals nearby. A far more recent example makes this pattern almost impossible to ignore. Roughly 1 in every 200 men alive today shares one single Y-chromosome. That shared chromosome traces back to a single powerful medieval ruler whose descendants conquered vast territory and fathered children across an entire empire. Historians link that genetic signature directly to Genghis Khan's lineage, whose sons and grandsons ruled harems spanning thousands of miles of conquered land. Somewhere between ancient hunter-gatherers and medieval empires, the same basic pattern kept repeating. Power translated directly into reproductive advantage for a select few. That genetic bottleneck lasted for centuries before eventually easing, as farming spread and power became harder for any single bloodline to monopolize. And once you know this, everything else makes more sense. Natural monogamy was never guaranteed, only ever one fragile possibility among several outcomes. Anthropologists surveying documented human societies found that most technically permitted men to take multiple wives, at least among the wealthy or powerful. Yet most ordinary ancient people still lived in simple monogamous pairs anyway, since few could actually afford the enormous cost of multiple households. That quiet detail matters enormously. Monogamy often survived less through pure love and more through basic ancient economic necessity instead. Think about a single ordinary farmer, unable to feed even one household comfortably, let alone several wives and an ever-growing number of children. Ancient legal codes reveal just how seriously societies policed loyalty once it existed. Hammurabi's code punished certain adulterous acts with death for both parties. Roman law similarly treated a wife's infidelity as a serious public offense, while quietly tolerating far more freedom for husbands under the very same laws. That legal imbalance suggests loyalty was never applied evenly. It was often a rule enforced far more strictly on women than on men. For most of history, marriage itself had little to do with romantic love at all, functioning instead as a careful alliance between families. Picture two family elders negotiating a marriage the way they might negotiate land, livestock, or a valuable trade agreement between neighboring households. Love, when it appeared at all, was treated as a fortunate accident, not the actual reason two ancient people were joined together. Only in the last few centuries did many cultures begin insisting that marriage should be built primarily around personal romantic choice instead. Divorce and separation existed far earlier than most people assume, with several ancient legal systems allowing pairs to formally dissolve a failed union. You imagine an ancient couple quietly separating, redistributing property and children according to established local custom, much like people still do today. Serial monogamy, moving through one loyal partnership after another over a lifetime, may have actually been more common historically than lifelong single pairing. Jealousy itself shows up almost universally across every studied human culture, the same ancient emotional alarm still firing today to protect a modern relationship. That universal jealousy suggests ancient minds evolved strong protective instincts around pair bonds, regardless of how loosely those bonds were actually enforced. You feel a flash of that same ancient alarm today, whether it appears as quiet suspicion or a sudden protective surge toward someone you love. Somewhere between hidden ovulation, bonding hormones, guarded fertile windows, and brutal genetic bottlenecks, one enormous pattern keeps quietly resurfacing across every study. Loyalty was never one fixed ancient rule. It was a flexible strategy, constantly renegotiated by biology, economics, power, and sheer circumstance. That flexibility meant some ancient couples stayed devoted for life, some quietly strayed, and some simply couldn't afford any other option at all. You realize your own instinct toward jealousy, attachment, and desire for connection carries traces of every single one of those competing ancient pressures. Here's the last piece of it. Even the powerful bloodlines that dominated reproduction eventually lost their grip as farming spread and empires crumbled. Every modern relationship you've ever had carries faint traces of hidden ovulation, bonding chemicals, guarded fertile windows, and a few dominant ancient bloodlines. So next time you feel that pull toward one person, remember, not quite a swan, not quite a bonobo, just 17 women for one man.